objectively, and make sure that at least you're as balanced as is possible. So what I would prefer to do is to speak to the guild as one professional to another. As you know, I am a lawyer by profession, a law teacher, and a practitioner. So I will speak to you on the subject which I have described as the end of the professions, the end of the professions. In particular, the end of journalism, the end of the professions, and in particular, the end of journalism. 2 years ago, I was having lunch with a friend of mine who teaches law and technology at a British university. And during the course of the lunch, he said to me that, did I realize that the legal profession as we knew it was coming to an end? I asked how so, and he replied that legal advice, from which many of our colleagues and myself derived great benefit, was now commodified by technology, and that there were now applications and even more sophisticated ones being made that would offer legal advice accurately, comprehensively, and objectively. And with artificial intelligence, they could even analyze data and make predictions about the outcomes of legal proceedings. Better, perhaps, and more accurately, and definitely more objectively than human lawyers such as myself. So when a client, we continue, asks, what are my chances of winning in court? Should we settle or go to trial? A lawyer would probably answer the question from the point of view of, if you don't go to trial, how will I earn my fees? But artificial intelligence and technology would probably answer that question objectively and ensure that that the person who wants the answer is given the answer completely objectively. Now, such a prediction would have required years of legal experience to make. Would you win in court or will you not win? But today, these predictions can be made in minutes by artificial intelligence, because artificial intelligence has access to all the trial data and the related information. But he was not finished yet. He said work on electronic judging was also going on. Electronic judging and arbitration was also going on. In other words, they were already developing judges, electronic judges. By that he meant that soon, contending parties in legal proceedings could submit their cases and arguments to an electronic judge, and the device would simply apply the law agnostically with complete objectivity and integrity and arrive at a decision. The good thing is that you can't bribe an electronic judge. At least I hope that you cannot bribe an electronic judge. I think that he then perceived that I was losing my appetite when, perhaps as consolation, he offered that it was not just the legal profession that was in its last days, that the accountancy profession was also perhaps in its last days, especially auditing and offering financial advice. Just like law, the job of financial advisors could be done electronically. Financial models could be developed digitally. The best advice would be given with the benefit of artificial intelligence. What is it that professionals anyway bring to the table? What should a professional bring to the table? Good, sound knowledge, information, objectivity, and integrity. Today, a lot of these are in short supply in most of our professions. So lawyers will give advice that they ensure that they get a job. An auditing firm will probably give what they call a true and fair view of the financials of a company, knowing that the views are neither fair nor true. So, for journalism, are we at the end also of your profession? Is your profession also in its dying days? Today, social media has practically become the source of news, of choice for a whole generation. everybody and anybody can own a medium, and they can say literally anything. There are individuals now who are called on-air personalities or social media personalities, and they are listened to and watched by literally hundreds of thousands of people. They usually have no training whatsoever in journalism or its ethics. So today, blogs have far more readership than newspapers and more viewership than television. Why, you can even do videos anyway on blogs. So it's not just a reading experience, you can also have the visual experience, which of course you can't do in a newspaper. Many newspapers, of course, have online versions now. And what that tells you is that they also have been dragged into competition with the digital media creations. And it is not easy. The journalism profession has always been at great risk anyway. Greater risk in my view than other professions. Freedom of expression has always meant that anyone could own or use an information medium. But there were financial and some regulatory barriers that created obstacles for all comers, except the most committed. This created some restrictions, but today all that is gone. Now who is to blame for the death of the profession? What can be done? The first culprit, of course, is technology, but it's fruitless blaming technology. This inevitable evil also has the capacity for overwhelming good. In any event, you can't eat your cake and have it. So let's leave technology alone. The second and most important culprit in the death of our profession is the professional himself or herself, the professionals themselves. Over time, we have lost the trust of our publics. What do people want? People want truthful information. They want objectivity. They want clear analysis of complex issues of the economy, of law, or the social sciences. Time was when someone would say, I read it in the Times, Daily Times, like this. It was the closest thing to scripture. If you said, I read it in the Times, it was meant to be absolutely true. Today, skeptics will ask you, who sponsored the story? Most of the investigative reporting, if it can be so described, is done by the ubiquitous blogs and online media. The likes of Newswatch, Tell, the News, etc. that wrote the big stories have all gradually disappeared. A guild, I'm sure that we all agree, is a society of gatekeepers. To you belongs the enormous task of defining the ethos, the mores, the ethics of your profession. Upon you is the burden of setting the acceptable rules, the conventions and practices of the profession. But this burden is made greater in a society where corruption is systemic and where there's a constant fight to deal with systemic corruption. But what is worse is not just setting the rules. It is the burden of a guild, the burden of the gatekeepers, to ensure that the rules are enforced and kept. When it is a self-regulatory profession, such as yours and mine, it's a very difficult thing indeed. But you are leaders by choice and the will of your colleagues. You must be held to account. So what is my own advice as one professional to another? Also, because I belong to a profession that is also in jeopardy. So let me share with you what we seniors in my own profession are telling ourselves. First, that corruption is a cancer. Once it is permitted or overlooked, it will eventually kill its victims. It will eventually kill the profession. When a lawyer aids the bribing of a judge, he is telling his clients that they really don't need a lawyer. All they need is somebody who knows the guy. Soon the client will not need the lawyer anymore. Secondly, if our system of justice is slow and we allow delays to frustrate cases, soon no one will do cases in our courts anymore. The British Court of Appeal, as a matter of fact, once quipped that it takes a generation to conclude a case in a Nigerian court. So the duty of the leaders of the profession is to make the personal sacrifices that will save the profession. personal sacrifices that will save the profession. What's the point of the Bar Association or the executive of the Bar Association? Or what's the point of the Guild of Editors if we cannot call out the corrupt and the unethical practices? If we cannot surgically remove the baggage in the interest of the profession and the interest of our own earnings? When the threat is existential, the response must be radical. Otherwise, we really may not have a profession. We may really be presiding over something that we're making ourselves believe exists when it has really disappeared. As President Funke Egbemode said, and as her story went, I'm sure you listened carefully to her story, the town crier who was bribed to publicize the coronation of a flawed choice of a king was the first to suffer the consequence of the wrong choice. The corrupt king, with a huge appetite, impregnated the town crier's brand new wife. I pray that we will not suffer that kind of consequence. Thank you very much for listening.